And I'll welcome you, Fiona. We're really happy you're here tonight to be part of our face-to-face Zoom conversations. You're here to share your book with us, your newest book, and some of your tips on how to go about self-publishing.
Yes.
And we're really happy that you've chosen to do that. I see a lot of people coming in, so maybe I'll keep talking for a minute to give them a moment to start. I'll let you know, just we have a little late edition next week, I think. Mary, you can let me know if this is true, but I think that next week Mary is going to do a really short little face-to-face program on cool things that your library card gives you access to. We now have a lot of different opportunities through your library card. So there's free movies, there's well, not free, but there are movies available, and there are lots of magazines and access to a lot of things you might not know about. So next week, Mary will do a program up for us on cool things your library card can get you. Quick little walk around our collections. So thanks for that. So Fiona, welcome. We're really happy that you're here. Thanks. Go for it.
Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Fiona Howell, for those of you who don't know. I'm usually an Irish musician during the day, usually, and sometimes I'm a writer. And I just self-published my first full book. And because in 2020, I didn't have much to do. I couldn't do my music gigs. So I wrote 3 books instead. So I have a lot of editing to do, but this is the first one, Blackwood, and it's under the Gothic genre, ghost story in Yorkshire, England, post World War II in 1945. And I've always loved historical fiction. And so I thought it'd be fun to add a little ghostly twist to it. And so I thought I'd read you chapters 1 and 2 because they're short, and it doesn't give much away at the beginning, so you'll just get a feel for it. And then I'll talk a little bit about it after. So, Blackwood, chapter 1. The year was 1945, just after the war. At that point in my life, I had seen some of the worst evils and the most horrific scenes that battle could bring. But I did not believe in ghosts. At least I didn't before I came to live at Blackwood Manor. I was sent by my mother to look after Uncle Charles and my 10-year-old cousin William. Uncle Charles had recently been diagnosed with colon cancer, and it had slowly been eating away at him. There was no cure, and my job was to keep him comfortable until the end. William would be left alone in the world when Uncle passed. His only living relatives were me and my mother. He needed proper care. I arrived at Blackwood Manor during a cold, dark Yorkshire fall night. The weather was typical for England, and I had come to like the rain more than I had expected. I found it comforting. When it rained during the war, there were fewer battles and skirmishes, which meant a break from treating the injured. A normal English person would have said they hated the rain. I was certainly not a completely normal English person. I had just finished my service as a military nurse. After years mending wounds and setting bones, I was ready to be done with the war and never look back. My heart ached as I tried to rid myself of the memories. The things I had seen were not fit to speak of. The car bumped down the road, drawing ever closer to Blackwood. We were in the woods. The thick branches overhead made it appear darker than it should. They cast a large shadow over the road. I breathed in the sweet scent of the pine trees. Raindrops pinged off the windshield, sliding down the windows. I stuffed my hands in the pockets of my coat for warmth, happy to finally wear something other than my nurse's uniform. England still did not seem used to peace. It would take more than a few months to go back to normal. I looked forward to my new position at Blackwood Manor. Though Mother had been sent away as a babe and never truly lived at the manor, it was still my family homestead. Hope filled me. There would be no more screaming and no more blood or gore to reach for me in my dreams. I stretched my neck, looking out the window so I could catch a glimpse of the house as I arrived. I squinted through the rain. Blackwood Manor. It was magnificent. I let out a sigh. The ancient house had multiple towers with turrets reaching up to the clouds. It was like a castle from a fairy tale. The widow's walk rested high against the roof. The house loomed in the darkening sky. Its tone was as gray as a storm cloud. On one side, ivy stretched to the roof. Mother had told me Uncle Charles did not like company, even family. It was why we had never been acquainted. I wasn't worried about my uncle and his sickness or his eccentric ways. I had seen and treated worse ailments. My concern was more with how to keep William occupied. I was no teacher unless he was interested in medicine. He was still a child, and I hoped he had a tutor of some sort. If he had not already secured someone for his schooling, I was not sure if it would be possible to find one. The war had changed so much for us. There were so many positions to be filled and so few left to fill them. London itself was still rebuilding. Uncle Charles could keep his peace and quiet, and I would fill my time with William. I could not fault Uncle Charles for wanting a calm house. I think we all needed it sometimes. The quiet of a large manor was why I'd accepted the position in the first place. Blackwood was deep in the Yorkshire countryside, tucked far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Perhaps this new position would save me from my nightmares. I talked to someone about them, but that had not helped in the slightest. I was not the only one who suffered, even though the war was over. The ghost still lingered behind the eyes of every soldier who managed to make it home. At least taking care of a child would bring some joy. A child's happiness was so simple. It was a true marvel. If only we could all be children again. I arrived at the grand entryway. The large courtyard crunched underneath my feet as I stepped out. The driver opened my door for me and held an umbrella at the ready. The cool breeze brushed my ankles, giving me a chill. The driver lifted my bag out of the back of the car. Thank you. I took the bag from his hand, giving him the money I had pulled from my handbag. We walked together toward the entrance as I looked up at the house looming above me. I sucked in a breath and let it out quickly. I would not be intimidated. I had survived the war. I would survive this too. Oh, how little I knew then. Chapter 2. I made my way up the front steps. I rang the bell, but there was no answer. The rain had begun to seep into my clothes, so I opened the door. I was surprised to find it unlocked. The foyer was eerily silent as I entered. Electricity was still scarce in parts of the country and unreliable when it was available. A large candelabra had been placed on a table near the center of the room. The candlelight flickered against the darkness. Uncle Charles had not come down, though I had not expected he would. I would have to storm the castle to get to his room. I took off my dripping coat in the hallway as a little boy ran toward me. You must be my cousin William. He nodded quickly, grinning in excitement. His hands clasped behind his back as he gave me a little bow. I could not help but smile in return at such a little gentleman. Have you had tea yet? I asked as I hung my coat on the nearby stand. William did not reply, simply shaking his head. I wondered what I would have to do to get him to talk to me. Something told me it would take time. Oh, Master William, you were supposed to tell me when she arrived. A short, middle-aged woman with chestnut hair and a white apron came bustling up to us. She carried a large lantern in one hand. Hello, I'm Sophie. I'm the housekeeper. Sophie reached her hand out and I hurried to shake it. If you ever need anything, just come and let me know. I take care of all the tedious household things. I know this place like the back of my hand. Master William can be a handful. Sophie glared in his direction, but William seemed to pretend not to notice. A wry smile peeked at the corner of his mouth. I smiled at their silent, playful banter. Oh, thank you. I'm sure William and I will get on just fine. I winked at William, who quickly looked away. A blush spread across his cheeks as he stared down at the floor. A white streak suddenly ran by us, startling me. My hand flew toward my heart in shock as I jumped a little. Oh, that is Ellie, the cat. You will probably see her eventually. She is quite shy, Sophie explained. I felt myself ease a little, smoothing out my dress to calm my nerves. William told me that he hasn't had tea yet. I would love some tea after being in the cold. The older woman threw her arms up in shock. Oh, yes, of course. The time has quite gotten away from me. Please follow me to the kitchen. I followed Sophie down the dim hallway, leaving my bag in the hall for later. William skipped ahead of me. His blonde curls bounced along in the dark corridor. As we walked, I was surprised to find no other maids or help. The dark corridor filled with light from Sophie's lantern. The silence of the manor stretched around me. Paintings of what I assumed must be my ancestors lined both sides of the walls. Each frame was tucked tight against the other, as if to squeeze in as many faces as possible. Each frowned down at me as I passed. Sophie brought us to the back of the house, and I felt a sense of relief as we left the oppressive hallway. We entered the enormous kitchen, and the tension in my shoulders eased at the glorious warmth now enveloping me. A large round table sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by half a dozen chairs. William scurried to the closest seat, pulling out the chair in a silent invitation. An enormous stove burned at the back of the kitchen. The fire crackled in the grate as Sophie placed the copper kettle atop it. Once again, I was surprised there weren't more people to help the housekeeper. Perhaps she preferred to do it herself. Do you have other help here? There's just the three of us, you, me, and Sam, the gardener. I do most of the cooking. We don't have a full staff like we used to. We are what's left. She shrugged her shoulders, and a look of great sadness spread over her face. I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Most households were struggling to find help due to the number of people lost during the war. I nodded. The three of us were silent until the tea kettle whistled. The shrill shriek filled the air, causing all of us to jump in our chairs. We could not help but laugh at ourselves for being so daft. William hurried to retrieve the porcelain teacups and matching saucers from the cabinet, placing one in front of each of our chairs. Sophie and I gave our thanks as she poured the tea. I took it upon myself to place biscuits on our plate. William waited quietly at the table. I was surprised at how shy he was. I wonder if that would change once he realized that I was there to stay. Part of me was also relieved that he wasn't a wild child. I longed for the quiet, needing it desperately. We sipped our tea in comfortable silence. It was still far too hot to drink. I chewed on a soft biscuit, wondering if I should sit in silence or make conversation. How was your journey? Sophie saved me from my thoughts as she blew on her tea. Uneventful, I shrugged my shoulders, giving her a small smile. She smiled back. The silence grew awkward, but neither of us was sure how to fill it yet. How is Uncle Charles? Sophie sighed, setting down her teacup. Not well. You will see him in time. He's not who he used to be. I wondered what she meant by that. Had he turned into a tyrant? Perhaps he was mean and had now gone the other way around. Some patients are not happy at all to be patients. Everyone had things they wished to accomplish, and there was nothing worse than being unable to do something for yourself. I fear he is not up for visitors at the moment. You will have to endure little William here for the time being. Sophie glared at William again. I wondered what he had done to warrant that look. Oh, I'm sure we will get on splendidly. I smiled at William, who gave me a tiny smile in return. Well, at least that was a start. Would you like to see your room? Sophie asked as we finished our tea. Mine was only half gone, but it was already getting cold. All right, we walked back to retrieve my suitcase from the foyer. The immense staircase reached out for us, overpowering the entryway. The red carpet on the stairs swept down like spilled wine. Up this way and to the right. It's easy to get turned around in this place at first. Sophie peered down the dark hallway, and I immediately knew what she meant. The corridor seemed to stretch on, branching out left and right as we walked. I wondered if I would get lost, and if I did, how long it would take for someone to find me. This way, Sophie said again. I had stopped to look at a rather gruesome painting of men hunting a fox. The fox was trailing blood behind it as it ran for its life. The faces of the men were filled with fury and determination as they chased alongside their hounds, their guns pointed directly at the helpless fox. I swallowed the lump in my throat, unnerved by the depiction. Here we are. Sophie opened the door to my new room. It was very old-fashioned. It had clearly not been given an update since the 20s or earlier. There was a fireplace along one wall, a bed waiting in the center, a modest dressing table against the far window, and a large chest of drawers near the door. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the dressing table, as Sophie lit a nearby lantern. My brown hair hung limp against my shoulders. Hours of travel had left it unkempt and wild. Deep shadows had settled under my gray eyes. I washed my face with warm water, hoping to bring warmth back to my cheeks, which had turned red from the cold. The air was stale, like a fresh breeze had not swept through it in decades. I could see the dust covering the floor and all the furniture. We don't use this wing very often, you see. Sophie's voice trailed off, and I could hear the apology in her words. You are the only one on this side of the house. I looked up at the tall ceiling that filled the room with shadows. The ceiling had been painted a pretty mosaic pattern. Dark greens and blues hung over me, like looking up at a canopy. Supper won't be for another couple of hours. I will leave you to get settled. If you need anything, I will be downstairs. I thanked Sophie as she left. Her footsteps faded away down the hall. I walked to my large window near the bed to see what my view was to be. The rain had slowed down. There was barely a trickle across the glass. The back courtyard stretched before me. The rolling green grass continued as far as I could see, ending at what I guessed was a line of trees. Hope filled me. It had been so long since I could take a walk in the woods. Perhaps that was where I would take William. Maybe he liked the forest too. I sighed, walking back toward the center of the room and resting on the bed for a while. Perhaps I would try and take a nap before supper. Sophie had said it would be a while. I looked at my watch. It was 4 p.m. I opened my suitcase and laid out what I would wear for supper. It wasn't the fanciest dress, but it would have to do. The size of the estate suddenly made me feel very small. My sadness was worsened as I remembered there were so few of us in the house. I longed for quiet, but the manor was something else entirely. It was almost too quiet. The wind blew against the window, and I was reminded that I would have to let myself get accustomed to the little creaks and moans that old houses sometimes make. So that is Blackwood and the back. So in November, I participated in what is known as NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in 1 month of November every year. And somehow I managed it with Blackwood. I got 50,100 words at the very end. And they also have Camp NaNoWriMo in April and July, where you get to choose your own word goal. And so I used those as practice, and I wrote 2 other very different books. I wrote a sci-fi, which is Jane 2.0, and the Treasure Hunter Chronicles, which is now a trilogy, and I'm working on the 3rd book, which I've never done before either. So I was just kind of playing around with genres, and I've always wanted to write a spooky haunted house mansion story because those are my favorites. I watch them and read them all year round, not just on Halloween. So I love dark stories, and they're usually set in England in the countryside. And so I use that as a classic trope. And 2 of my favorites are The Turn of the Screw and The Woman in Black. And so there are a few inspirations from those. And so I used that as like a kind of guide to help me when I got stuck. But yeah, I'm still writing, and I was working on my sci-fi before lockdown, and then that happened. So I just kept writing, and luckily I wrote Blackwood, and in the summer, right before Halloween, I decided to publish it on Halloween. So I had my friend who was from college. She just started an editing, and she has a bunch of women working with her who do different things, but she started an editing company. So I was like, please be my editor. And it was like working with a friend, which was really nice. And she brought it up to the next level. And her company also had a formatter as well as a cover artist designer, Frina Art, who did the cover. And I love how inside has these roses as chapter headings and chapter breaks, which is really cool. So yeah, are there any questions about it or publishing in general?
I love that you have an editor, and you had that sort of not so much help, but just assistance, I guess. Not
Yes.
the word. It's just having that someone else's eyes on it before you put it out to the public, I think would be super important. I always thought that was a really great model for self-publishers to have someone set up an editing company. And about 10 years ago, I did worked up a business plan for doing that and then decided, nah, I don't really want to do that. But anyway, it just seemed like such a good idea. And I'm so glad that you found that and that it actually exists. I used to design books, the interiors and covers years ago, back when it was done a little differently. But I really did like that, just the interest in the inside, because it's so easy just to put it in a format and have it just be straight text. So good on you and your group of friends.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, my editor had the idea for adding chapter headers. So I was like, ooh, didn't think of that. But there are all these things you have to think about when creating something like this. But yeah, I didn't want to do it all by myself. And I had loads of people reading for me to catch things, because no matter what, you're going to have typos. So yeah, it's better if other people help me. Because if I edit, I'm like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah. Did you have you ever been to Yorkshire? Did you have a picture of a place, or is it just from all the books that you've read, sort of set in that place, like you said, it's your trope?
I've been to England, but I've never been to Yorkshire yet, which is funny. So that's on my list, is to go to Yorkshire, see if I got it right. I did have to look up if they had fall colors, because I wasn't sure, and I was trying to find Yorkshire words, like what would they say, like slang. And I actually know somebody from Yorkshire, but he didn't really know any. So I had to look up the list. I was like, would they really say that? I don't know. But yeah, I used one of the words just because.
There's a question from McCarthy's. Did you have an editor for your other books? And what sorts of things did they change in the editing process?
Yes. So I do have other editors. I tried one editor out, but I didn't like her so much. So I went to my friend. But yeah, so we did one overall, what they call a manuscript edit at the very beginning, where you do all the big stuff first, like change, the timeline, which we did do in here, or change some big scenes or rewrite an entire chapter, that kind of thing first. And then you do the copy edit, which is just grammar and tedious spelling mistakes, that kind of thing. So we went over it a lot. I worked on it for like 6 months.
And the same with your other books also? You had the same editor?
Well, I will do, yes. I do have one other, it's a novella, and for this one I had an editor from Amazon who was actually really good. She did a lot of, she knew her history, so that helped a lot. The Lockbox. This was my senior high school project that I published in 2013. Hadn't written anything since then, and then after college I was like, I can write stuff now. So yeah, it's very different. You can choose whoever you want to edit, pretty much. Like there are lots of freelance editors out there, but you have to be careful, obviously.
Hope, do you have a question? And then Betsy?
Yeah, just similar to what Mary was asking about. I wondered if how you'd found out about the right word to use for that decade in Yorkshire. I heard the word handbag and wondered, I wonder, were they using handbag in Yorkshire in the 40s or early 50s? Just those kind of things. How did you research that?
That generally, historical fiction is what I read, and it's mostly based in England. So I just kind of went with what they would say in those, just from my general knowledge. But yeah, 1945 was kind of a new decade for me to write in. But yeah, I kind of write that way anyway. Like I feel like I'm a very old-fashioned person when I'm writing. Somebody caught that I said they had a stitch in their side. I was like, don't normal people say that? I say that. So, things like that. But yeah, I did have to research Yorkshire slang. There is a list. There's a long list on Google. You can find it. So that helped.
Betsy, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say that I've used local writing groups as a first go around in terms of revision. I was in memoir groups down in Five College Learning and Retirement down in the Northampton, Mass area for a long time, and they all listen to versions of things. And then up here, I've been in Paige Coulter's group, and that group, listen, I'm going to have a memoir that's self-published that it's down at the publisher now. It feels like it's just gone into a black hole. I've got to dig it out. But in any case, I would imagine it will surface around March or so. But I've also used Pico Todd, who's local, who's done a lot of copy editing and, the whole formatting thing that you have to do for publishing. I mean, I just have it in Word, and so she's done all of the technical stuff to get it from what I do to something that a self-publisher can take it on. And I've used just a local group down in Amherst where I lived in many years, Amherst, Mass, Collective Copies, and they have a little publishing company. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. And I'll maybe, Amy, ask, though, I guess this doesn't apply to you. Mine are memoirs, and this particular one is my memoir, and I find myself a little, I'm not sure I really want to share all this with the general public. I wrote it for myself, but I think that's something that anybody who writes a memoir has to say, oh my heavens, what is the family going to think of this?
Fiona, were you part of a writing group at all, Fiona?
I have been. Denny Morton has a poetry
one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was in that for a while before lockdown, obviously. And we had one during the summer where we were kind of more outside a little bit. But yeah, I kind of used poetry as my way to get back into writing. I set myself a goal to write a poem every week. So that'll keep me writing. And the other thing I did, I started a writing YouTube channel. They call it AuthorTube. So I started doing writing vlogs, and that actually really helps. Like, it makes you write every day. It's like, oh, I've got to do the full week vlog kind of thing. So, oh, I need to write today. So that helps a lot. I did take 2 months off after NaNoWriMo because my brain was just broken after writing so much. But yeah, it's been really fun, and I really like making videos. So I do that video at whenever I'm writing, basically I do a video, and then I also do a video for my music stuff every week as well. So yeah.
Does music figure into this book at all?
Not really. They're very separate in my brain somehow. I don't know why. But yeah, this is just a pure ghost story. And then the one I'm working on right now is treasure hunting people, which I love. So it's basically just an adventure series. So two very different things, but yeah.
Somebody asked how NaNoWriMo works. If we hosted a NaNoWriMo many years ago at the library, but if you want to describe how it works, that would be great.
Yeah, there's a website for it, and you go on the website, make a profile, and you can announce your project that you're working on. And it has a little bar. You have to insert your word count every time, and you get badges for different things. But basically, it just makes you write every day for a month, and to get 50,000 words. And by the end, you have a first draft. So it's very exciting. It's very
And you're
hard.
part of a supportive community, right? Because other people are doing it, so you feel like you're you're working kind of as hard as everybody else.
Yeah, and there are live streams on YouTube. I know that people do writing sprints and such, and at all hours of the day. So there are lots of people doing it. But yeah, I use that to get myself back into writing. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a novel because I've written tons of novellas and they're all really short. So just wanted to write an actual book. So yeah.
And then Beth asked, does anyone read the 5,000 or 50,000 words? And it depends on what you do with it, right? It depends on where it goes and how it's shared with the world.
Right. Well, what I should have done is edited it before I sent it to my editor, but I didn't. So it's like, here are my 50,000 words, have at it. And she was very brutal with me. So, but it was good. It's like, this time I'm going to have people read it before I send it to her, and then she can have it.
Sounds like a fun thing. You keep you working, keep you at it.
Yes, that's the most important part, is to keep doing it, because the more
Yeah.
you do, the easier it gets. If you
Hope
take
is wondering where your book is for sale.
Amazon. It's on Kindle for $10 and the paperback is $16. I love the paperback version. But yeah, on Amazon. I don't know if I'm gonna do anything. There are other publishing companies you can use if you're self-publishing as well, like Ingram Spark. Barnes and Noble Press has one now. So there are many different places you can publish. So it's kind of confusing. So I've watched millions of videos about this on where to go, but Amazon seems to be the best way to start, at least. And before, I used to be CreateSpace, and I actually had to change over from CreateSpace to Kindle Direct Publishing. It had been that long since I did anything on Amazon. So that was fun. But yeah, it's pretty good on Amazon.
So I can tell you that sometimes self-published things are tough to get in libraries.
Mhm.
And sometimes it has something to do with, we're finding out about them.
Yeah.
But Library Journal's doing a better job, and Booklist is a review journal we all read, published by the American Library Association. But they now have a column that's a self-published showcase, and it's about 2 or 3 pages. So there's about I'd say about 10 or 12 reviews every issue, and it's issued about 50, I want to say 20 times a year or so. So there's plenty of. I'm not sure how you get it to them to review it, but they the ones they put in the Booklist publication are the ones they recommend. So that's always one good place for us to look, but they can be challenging to find out about. And the other part that's challenging is getting them in ebook form for libraries, and that's just an ongoing problem with publishers and ebooks in general, just getting them out there. But I'm so glad that you that you did this and you're sharing how you did it. I love the cover of it, by the way. The whole thing, it just fits how you described it in the first chapters. Definitely set the tone. So it is a package when you don't realize that as a book, that the cover really, you can't judge a book by its cover, but people will pick it up because it's got a good cover. So
Yeah.
work with those.
Yeah, I almost called it The Haunting of Blackwood Manor, but it would be too close to The Haunting of Bly Manor, which Netflix did. So it's like, I don't want to be copyrighted for that.
Yeah.
So, and it is kind of different because normally you don't see just like the name of the manor on the house, but I wanted it to be central because it is about the house. So, and she did a great job on it. She was very easy to work with. But yeah, at one point, I think my mom said it looked like a book she would pick up at the airport. I was like, good.
No kidding. Keep you entertained on the plane, and
Yeah.
get your mind off the turbulence. So I love the line you said, had a line in there about England wasn't used to peace, and I thought that was just such a good line.
Yeah,
Whole phrase. It's just it's fun when they kind of click.
yeah, it should be very close to like right after the war. So like, oh, they're kind of still, unsettled by it. So
It reminded me of kind of not being used to, like when we come out of the pandemic, it will probably be in the same situations. We'll have to remember, we're just not used to this. But I love that way of thinking about a society as a whole.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it felt very similar to where we are now, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's still different. But I also used her. She says that in the beginning she might not have nightmares anymore, but she does. She has a lot of nightmares. So that's a very unique thing I haven't seen in ghost stories before, at least not written ones. I've seen them in movies. Obviously, it's easier to show dreams like that. But yeah, I thought it'd be cool to have the parallel of the nightmares to what's really happening in the house.
And you left us on a cliffhanger there a little bit, didn't you?
Yes, I did on purpose. Sorry. But yeah, I didn't want to give too much away.
Well, it went out of the library yesterday, so.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
somebody had
so
it.
wherever I am at the time, like in the town, I've been dropping it off at the Cook Library, and it's in Maine now as well, because we inherited my grandfather's house over there. So there's the Owl's Head Library, which I gave it to them, and Hello Hello Books in Rockland, Maine. So whenever you're near like an independent bookstore, just go in and like be like, here, I wrote this for your local author section. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Nice.
Yeah. So hopefully it'll be in Yorkshire at some point. They might tell me I got it all wrong though, so.
Sell your suitcase, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else have any other questions or?
Hmm.
Or Fiona? Anything else, Mary? But we thank you, Fiona.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us and your process. And
Yeah, I like nerding out about writing and music because those are the things that I do.
That's what we love hearing about it. It's good to just to have local writers come share their work. And I always appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's so many local authors, like everybody in the Valley is a writer of some sort, either poetry or fiction. They read a lot too, so everybody's very knowledgeable about certain things. So if I have to ask a question, I'm like, what is this about? Can you ask somebody in the Valley?
Plenty of resources. That's great.
yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
And thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And it's at the library. You can go find it.
Exactly. Come on in and get a copy if you don't buy one on Amazon.
Yes, exactly. All
Thanks
right.
so much, Fiona. We really appreciate spending time with you tonight.
Yeah, same here. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.